There was a winter in 1916 when the guns along the Western Front fell quiet under heavy snow, but the killing did not stop. Men who had survived shell fire and machine guns began losing toes, feet, and sometimes even their lives to something far less dramatic. Cold. It crept into trenches built below the water table, soaked uniforms, froze blankets stiff as boards, and turned rifles into blocks of ice. Veterans later admitted that winter frightened them more than enemy assaults. And yet, in that frozen maze of mud and timber, ordinary soldiers engineered one of the most effective low-tech heating systems in modern military history. If you value real survival knowledge drawn from the past, this episode is for you. On Warfront Survival, we break down the practical lessons history leaves behind. If you appreciate deep research and actionable insight, take a moment to like the video. Share it with a fellow history enthusiast, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Now let's get straight into the ingenuity that kept thousands alive when coal ran out and open fires meant death. By the winter of 1916, along the Western Front, trenches had evolved from temporary fighting positions into semi-permanent scars stretching across France and Belgium. In Flanders, the water table sat so high that trenches rarely drained. When temperatures dropped, the mud did not freeze solid. It became an icy slurry that trapped boots and wicked heat from the body hour after hour. Medical records from the war document tens of thousands of cases of trench foot. The condition developed not simply from cold, but from prolonged exposure to dampness combined with restricted circulation. The body's extremities surrendered first. Toes turned pale, then blue, then black. Preventive measures such as frequent sock changes and whale oil applications slowed damage, but did not solve the core problem. What soldiers needed was steady, controllable heat in a space where smoke and flame could draw enemy fire. Open fires were risky. A plume of smoke rising above parapets could invite artillery. A flicker of light at night could attract a sniper's scope. The battlefield forced a brutal trade-off. Warmth increased visibility. Invisibility increased frostbite. The solution would need to be compact, low smoke, and efficient. German troops referred to it as the Hindenburg Light, but across the lines variations of the same idea appeared. An empty ration tin became the body. Corrugated cardboard, cut into long strips, formed the core. Melted wax, paraffin, or animal fat served as fuel. The engineering principle was elegant. Corrugated cardboard contains vertical flutes that act as capillary channels. When tightly rolled into a spiral and inserted into a tin, those channels create hundreds of microwicks. Once molten wax is poured in and allowed to solidify, fuel saturates the structure. When lit, the entire top surface burns as a broad, steady flame, rather than a fragile, single wick. This design increases surface area and oxygen exposure, generating a hotter and more stable burn. A properly packed trench candle could last, 6 to 8 hours, depending on fuel quality. It produced less visible smoke than damp wood and could be shielded easily within a dugout. Soldiers used it to boil water, thaw frozen rations, dry socks, and, warm hands before sentry duty. For modern viewers, the actionable lesson is straightforward. Efficient heat comes from maximizing fuel contact with oxygen while controlling airflow. A tin container limits lateral heat loss. A dense wick structure increases burn consistency. In a blackout scenario today, the same principles apply when constructing emergency candles from household waste materials. The device itself was simple. Fuel sourcing was not. War zones operate on scarcity. When official supplies ran thin, soldiers scavenged. Paraffin was scraped from broken lamps. Candle stubs were pooled. Animal fat was rendered when possible. On the German side, standardized versions were eventually mass-produced. Allied soldiers often relied on improvisation. This scavenger economy, built a culture of shared heat. Diaries from British and German troops, they describe pooling wax to create communal candles. Warmth in those days became currency. A lit tin in a dugout meant dry socks for one man, boiling water for another, and just a few precious minutes of restored circulation before returning to watch. The lesson here, honestly, extends beyond nostalgia. Redundancy in fuel sources really matters. In any crisis, dependence on a single supply chain is, a vulnerability. Soldiers diversified instinctively. Modern preparedness, follows the same rule. Store multiple fuel types. Understand their burn characteristics. And, importantly, know how to adapt when one source disappears. As winter deepened, some units, you might say, went further. Using petrol tins, biscuit boxes and mud reinforced with straw, they constructed primitive vertical draft stoves that actually resemble modern rocket stoves. These designs cleverly exploited the stack effect. As hot air rose through a vertical chimney, it created a pressure difference at the base, drawing in fresh oxygen and, intensifying combustion. The result was a hotter, cleaner flame with reduced smoke output. Mud and clay packed around the stove acted as thermal mass, absorbing heat and releasing it gradually. British records reference devices such as the Camelback stove, capable of heating larger dugouts and cooking for multiple men. This was not formal engineering. It was applied physics learned from farms, workshops and factories. Airflow, insulation and fuel efficiency determined survival. Those same principles define modern off-grid stove design. Control oxygen intake, insulate combustion chambers, channel heat upward before allowing it to dissipate. Improvised heating carried risks. Many fuels were impure. Animal fat and low-grade paraffin produced soot and harmful particulates in enclosed spaces. Dugouts lacked proper ventilation. Soldiers traded immediate cold injuries for long-term respiratory damage without realizing it. For modern practitioners, this is a critical warning. Any combustion device in a confined space requires ventilation. Carbon monoxide is odorless and lethal. Even improvised heaters must be used with airflow in mind. History offers inspiration, but it also demands caution. A century later, trench candles have resurfaced in contemporary conflicts, including in the war in Ukraine, proving that certain designs endure because they work. Technology evolves. Logistics fail. Cold remains constant. The enduring lesson from the trenches is not romance. It is resilience built on understanding fundamentals. Heat requires fuel, oxygen and containment. Efficiency depends on airflow management and insulation. Community multiplies survival odds. Knowledge outweighs equipment. The men who rolled cardboard into tins were not inventors seeking patents. They were soldiers refusing to freeze. Their example challenges us to learn the mechanics behind comfort before comfort disappears. If this deep dive into wartime ingenuity sharpened your understanding of survival under pressure, share it with someone who values practical history. Subscribe to Warfront Survival for more hard lessons drawn from the past, and keep building the knowledge that turns scraps into lifelines.